This week on The Binge Thinker is all about AI, how it'll affect your future, what won't it affect, how can you make the most of it, and what are the challenges for humanity as we face into a new technological future. My name is Jamil Raymond. I am The Binge Thinker. Hello and welcome to The Binge Thinker episode 48. My name is Jamil Raymond. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here as always. This week's episode, we're going to continue on from part one of the conversation around AI. Turns out I got a lot of more thoughts on it than I thought I would originally when I wrote out this ep. So I'm going to deep dive into this. Last week we talked about the emergence of it, what the current limitations are with ChatGPT. But it is a major concern for people involved in tech and humanity in general, as we have reached a point of intelligence that surpasses our own. So we're going to talk a little bit more perspective on where the current gaps are in AI, ChatGPT, all of the hot buzzwords around this emerging technology, and then some of the ways that you can work around it or work with it as it emerges and matures into a technology. Despite the massive hype around it, it's still quite an immature product and solution, and how we can work with technology, augment it, integrate it into our lives, and ultimately be the master of it instead of it being the master of us. So, without further ado, let's kick this bad boy off. So, last week we talked about, yes, it's coming. ChatGPT is coming. It is going to come for us. It's going to take some shit. It's already taking away some of our low functioning human roles, talking about human glue, simple process oriented jobs, a lot of stuff that is outsourced to call centers or any level of outsourcing which requires a lower degree of human potential compute capability, low-lying tasks that are not value adding into processes. There we go, give you a new, more masculine but as this product matures over the next decade plus, this is a technology that will not go away for many, many reasons. The primary commercial reason is that we are going to get to a point where this intelligence is cheaper, faster, and more productive than humanity, which we've already seen, hence why it's taking over, and there's a lot of investment into it. But how can we ride the wave as it emerges to our own benefit to make sure that we don't become, at the end of, like the intro of Terminator 2, where you see all the humans just splayed around while the robots take over and Skynet has dominated us all. I'm trying to help us avoid that kind of future. So let me do what I can. I don't think I'm the John Connor of the 22nd century. I probably will be one of those fleshbags at the bottom, or I could be the evil guy that's maybe the mechanical megamind that sits behind it all. I could be that dude. But that makes me the antagonist. No, I want to be the good guy, the protagonist. So maybe I'm John Connor, who knows? Anyway, we're talking about what are the gaps. It's not there yet. It's not ready as a solution. It's not going to come over tomorrow, knock on our doors, and destroy us all. So, what are the current gaps that I see? And how can you, dear listener, make the most of those gaps? So, let's kick things off yet again. So one of the key issues that I see with AI, from a principles perspective, is that we are generating artificial intelligence. The problem is, original human intelligence isn't that great as a collective, right? We have our smartest, most talented, logical people working on AI, right? There are some real nerds tinkering away at this shit. And it is a very logical based phenomena. It's an intelligence based phenomena. But just like, think of AI as humanity's child, right? We as the great collective human consciousness that is now being ratified by the internet, as an example, how are we going to pass on the relevant information that exists in this big wide world onto the child that is artificial intelligence and teach it in a way that it will progress humanity for humanity's sake or for not humanity's sake? It can work with or against us. So when we talk, one of the key concerns I've got around it is with ChatGPT, for example, it's a language-based model. So language is very subject to interpretation. So we also have challenges such as bias that will come into this language and the tone, which we'll cover in a later sec. But the first thing is about source knowledge, right? AI is a learning machine, okay? Learning machine. It has to learn from something. What is this something? This is the source input that we create and put into this machine for it to integrate the data, use its algorithms to create something of value on the other side. So our question is, what are the verifiable and, where are these sources of information coming from, and who is mitigating the risk of bad data going into these learning machines and not creating downstream issues from false information, bad calculations, bad code that people are just constantly spitting out of ChatGPT and other AI models at the moment, right? So it's like, it's similar to any other resource that we've got, like water, right? Our water systems, they thankfully come from a beautiful, pure place, which is the sky, which gets rid of most impurities, but they go through our rivers and lakes. And our rivers and lakes are catchment areas that are protected by the government, that are cleansed using a whole range of stuff that we learned in primary school for some reason in extraordinary detail. I remember there being alum filters and different types of filtration and things like that before we get tap water that is increasingly bad for us day by day, thanks to the eroding copper pipes and copper piping that exists in our modern plumbing systems. Great. But what is the equivalent of that filtration, of that piping system, of that source of water, which is information, same thing, in ChatGPT? Who moderates that data? How do we know that the inexcusable, something that's infallible, that's probably a better word for it, the infallible elements of knowledge that is placed into ChatGPT, who is making sure that that's correct, up to date, untarnished, right? Think of it like in a similar way to Wikipedia. Wikipedia is open source information on the internet, okay? So that's another thing that'll probably get decimated by ChatGPT, right? Is Google's reach and what am I going to say? So Google's grip on the search market, right, which is its core business, and Wikipedia's core business, which is open source, publicly available, correct information for everyone, as the source of information, the basis of that. We know that Wikipedia has a foundation that they absolutely scream at us to donate every time we're on there to make sure that this data is kept clean, is kept relevant, is kept up to date. And that is a foundation that is independent of any other organization, as we hope it is, okay? But now, with AI models, and for example, ChatGPT is basically a monopoly in AI at the moment, thanks to its 100 million active user base. That information, that attention now that is being placed, that intelligence is now subject to the owner of ChatGPT, which is OpenAI, which is therein owned by Microsoft. Okay? So this is where the consideration of bias will also start to kick in. Okay? Let's just say, for example, there is, a political influence, or there is propaganda that wants to be created out of, ChatGPT. If you go, hey ChatGPT, find me Trump's tax file information or his, all of his corporate finances for the last 10 years. Okay, where is he going to get that information from? And for example, is there concerns about privacy that can be blocked out by Microsoft? Right? If Microsoft is a left-leaning tech company, will it allow it to do things like search up political, in air quotes, competitors compared to a more liberal or democratic perspective? There has been some murmurs, nothing legitimate that I've seen, this is just hearsay, about ChatGPT responding to prompts to mock Trump, but not Biden. So then there's this obvious political bias in the information, and that is concerning because truth should be impartial. If you're using this for the basis of knowledge, which is truth, and that truth is subject to change and update through the scientific method, which we know, but then is also subject to being taken away, being removed, because it doesn't fit the bias or the agenda of the people that are in power. For example, the removal of the electric car in the early 1900s by Henry Ford, and the suppression of other technologies and the suppression of hemp and marijuana usage because cotton owners and cotton, like robber barons in the 18 and 1900s, didn't want to use hemp because it was a cheaper and faster material, and they didn't want to divest from cotton, so they put a lot of propaganda against marijuana and the hemp industry to prevent it from taking over. What's to say that this kind of stuff won't happen again? So the the bias around it also becomes a philosophical question as well. Because if you go deeper on this lack of bias, whether it be political, the great fear around AI, and it's the primary fear around it is that it'll supersede us. And why do we think it will supersede us? Because I think there is this inherent knowledge societally and this inherent guilt that we're not doing right by the environment, we're not doing right by ourselves, we are not doing right by humanity. So we always have this fear that something that's smarter than us is going to turn on us and go, hey, you guys are really fucking up here out of convenience and slovenliness and, the monkey mind and our, us being apes and having that egoic perspective of just consuming everything and not giving a fuck about the environment that we're in as curators of the planet, and it'll eradicate us. Right? We have that deep-seated fear. And how do you build that into an intelligence system? Right? How do we give it that perspective? And that's a really deep philosophical and technological question. And again, it's also subject to the influence and the bias of the inputs that are put into this artificial intelligence. Now, over time, the monopoly on AI will decrease to ChatGPT and Microsoft, for example, because as a premium product and as a language learning model, there are other people that are going to compete in a monolithic market to try and take some market share. That's just economics and business 101. So there are going to be other models that might have different perspectives or different biases, and may have specialized information that it can get really deep on. Because right now, this is quite a generalist intelligence. It's in its very early phase. So, yeah, the business models and the commodification of AI is still yet to be seen over the next decade, let's call it. So, as we diversify the sources of artificial intelligence from different tech organizations, different federations, etc., we might see intelligence that has its own bias or has its own limitations based on what the consumer, i.e., a human, wants to receive from the intelligence itself. So we are never going to be completely free of bias in this intelligence because our own intelligence that designed it is full of bias. So therefore, it is, the discernment of the information is going to be a challenge if you are using it to be reliable and if you're going to formulate, a business on it, if you're going to create a lifestyle around it, if it's going to integrate into your life in the process as it takes over in your personal life, as, potentially being an AI assistant or something similar. So that's going to be a challenge. Now, with that information that we are fed, we are also losing the ability to discern its source. We did say, where's it going to come from? But how do we double check that? So right now, playing around with ChatGPT, it just spits you an answer. Okay? It doesn't really tell you where the source of that information has come from. Like we said last week, ChatGPT 3 is essentially 5 Google searches meshed together. So if you were to do 5 Google searches, when you check the first page of Google, it has the most relevant information due to indexing. We are still able to look at a website when we look for things on Google and go, is there authority behind this? Is there social proof? Is this verifiable? Has this come from a trusted source? So in its current format, that isn't really applicable to us or isn't really shown to us. So that discernment becomes a bit of an issue or a concern if in its current state. I'm sure it'll improve over time, but the ability to discern the information, recognize whether it's true or not, particularly if you are using it to integrate into complex, there's a lot of people that are using algorithms and source code and are coding from ChatGPT. There's this article that I saw that GitHub, which is a very popular website where developers will submit and publish their code for the benefit and sharing of other people. It's a community of developers that share their outputs. There is a significant influx of AI-generated code being put into GitHub. Now, again, without the trial and error, without the social proof of experience of an institutionalized developer or someone that's got a lot of rep in the community, all right, verifying this information or knowing it's correct or knowing if it's dense enough or it doesn't have any vulnerabilities associated with the code, right? There's a lot of, when you build a house, you've got to make sure that every brick works. So similar to with code, you've got to make sure that that brick is sturdy, has no cracks, has no bullshit in it, no vulnerabilities before you add it to the stack. But if we're just flooding the market now with a whole bunch of bricks that we don't know are good or not, how do we know they're going to last in the long run? How do we understand that they're actually going to be beneficial for us and actually do what they're going to be doing? And again, that's why I talked about last week, the age of curation, where the commodification of information reduces its inherent value, and it's officially up to us as people that have lived the experience and being able to discern the information that's given to us to know whether it's factual, useful, or not. So that's the next evolution of value creation, as we talked about last week. So based on this lack of discernment, lack of quality information, it's very difficult to trust ChatGPT and AI in its current state. And it's going to be very difficult ongoing for organizations and society for us to trust AI the moment there is these vulnerabilities in the perception of the source information, right? Once we know that this thing that is supposedly smarter than us starts to expose a weakness or expose a bias, then our susceptibility to utilizing and taking it up and adopting it will significantly decrease, right? All of these tools are only as good as the people that want to use them. Do not forget that about AI and any technology tool, right? It's only as useful as our application into our own lives for our own benefits, societally or personally. So there's got to be a degree of trust that's built up before this shit hits the mainstream, right? And the only way to do that, I think, for a transformation of this magnitude societally is to be able to create independent bodies that can sort of like maintain and moderate the source information that goes into these learning models, making sure that, the stuff that you can't fuck up, like physics formulas and the table of elements and all these sorts of things that are fundamental scientific, scientific fundamentals is basically what I'm trying to say here, are enmeshed and are deliverable from these AI learning models to provide confidence in the source information, right? And as you get more complex with what it includes or how it interprets the language you put into it and its outputs get more complex, it's really just like, a person that that talks a little bit of shit and you're going, well, how much of this is really true and how much of it do you really know? From a maturity perspective, consider AI like a smart teenage intern, right? Got a bit of nous, He's got a, he knows a thing or two. He's probably spent a few days in the basement away from people and girls learning about stuff. But how much of this stuff has he really learnt, taken in, converted from knowledge into wisdom through verification, through putting it to the test? You don't know. You don't know. So once there are some checks and balances in the source information around AI and yeah, in any artificial intelligence that we use in any function, there's always going to be this degree of lack of trust. But I will warn that this is the Wild West right now. So if that means there are people that would be willing to take risks on information, on source code and information that isn't necessarily correct or true, and sell it as a product. Snake oil salespeople. That's very susceptible in this new wave of technology and adoption, just like any other new wave of adoption or technology, right? Without the science to back it up, without any source of verification or social proof, there's a lot of people that can go out there and say something is valuable and powerful, and it's fucking not. Let's look at NFTs. They've gone right? And we knew that was going to happen on the micro level in the short term because there's no function of it. But in the long term, the actual underlying technological function of things like smart contracts and decentralized finance is useful once we know how to use it later on, when there's science and there's people that have actually tested it and fucked around with it to a point where it's honed and it's ready for consumption. Similar stuff with AI. So people will take these risks with these businesses like FTX, for example. That was precariously, a huge organization that absolutely fell to shit because it was precariously managed through poor financial mismanagement, poor operational management. It was built on fucking smoke. And there are going to be AI models that are going to be built on smoke and sold to unwary individuals that want the quick buck or want the shortcut to success. That's reality. That's what happens in life. That's happened at every phase of human development and, evolution. So be ready for it and don't be dumb enough to fall for it. I pumped a lot of words into that segment. Holy shit. You might have to listen to that one again on half speed because I had a lot of thoughts that just churned out a lot at once. I've taken Alpha Brain again, pre-podcast, which is probably a bad idea because I'm starting to get a little sweaty. And that's why I'm talking so fast, because my brain is on, it's on NOS at the moment, which is good shit. Delicious, delicious. You'll get it. You'll live. All right. So what we talked about, when does this become a real risk, AI, when we come to the challenges of source and bias? This is going to be complex and probably not viable within the next decade, which is good, gives us enough time. But once the information, the knowledge, engine has its own ability to update and verify its own information, which is not impossible to do, right? I mean, a lot of information that we have in society is assumed knowledge or presumed knowledge, right? And there's a lot of information, all of our scientific method-based ways of discovering new things and honing in on what's actually true has a degree, I think it's like 95 or 99.95% probability of being correct. So there are things like statistical models and variables and probability that govern a lot of our society as it is. For example, things like, what are they called? Hedge funds, right? Day traders. Most of the finance markets are built on very complex statistics and probability-based algorithms regarding financial information, likeliness to succeed, to grow, to fail, and they put fail-safes in at different buy and sell prices to ensure that they are profitable, hit their target margins or profitability, whatever that sort of stuff is. So there is very much capability for intelligence engines, big data, AI to self-correct its information, verify it, and use statistical probability to automate the function of tuning and moderating its own data. So when we get to that point, then we're in deep shit because it's teaching itself, it's correcting itself, and if it can be beyond our own biases around the information, the truth, whether we like it or not, that's when we're in deep shit. When we lose the human element of discernment of our own complex capability in understanding what it's teaching us and what we think is bullshit, then we're in deep, deep shit. So, like I said, that's still a long way away, I think. Um, yeah, don't stress about that yet, but know that it's out there. Know that it's out there. So, one of the other limitations that AI has right now is its resource consumption, right? It is a very expensive thing to run intelligence in general, okay? For example, at a human scale, our brains take up, the little thing here, take up just 2% of our body weight, but they use 20% of our human calorie intake per day. Okay, so even though it's a small thing by the mass, what it requires to power and function is actually quite a lot. And the same thing applies to computing power. Now, this is a little bit of my area of expertise because I actually sell compute power and servers in a day job. Yeah, so compute power is expensive. So the ability to run all of these functions, all of these algorithms on servers that take up a lot of processing power because it has to process a lot of complex information through complex algorithms all at once is extremely complex stuff. Most of the computing that is utilized for this stuff is high quality, high grade computing power, and that shit is just not cheap. Um, Graphical processing, high performance compute, all very expensive because you have to process way more ones and zeros than the standard computer. So, how this will change over the next decade is something called Moore's Law. So, Moore's Law it's not really a law, it's a theorem that's based on anecdotal evidence. But basically, that stipulates that computing power will roughly double every 18 months to 2 years based on the amount of transistors you can add into an integrated circuit. So the ability to run electricity through these transistors to process ones and zeros doubles every 2 years. And that's why we've seen the exponential growth in what is capable in a computer since personal computing started and general computing started in the 50s. Okay, it's been absolutely exponential in that time. So as that increases in time, and the role of the semiconductor industry, which is a key industry now globally, we've seen it be a political issue in Taiwan. We've seen the US release the CHIP Act to bring semiconductoring and manufacturing back onto US shores because it's a key component of the tech industry and what enables most of the global businesses nowadays. Is that computing power is essentially doubling every 2 years. The role of the semiconductor industry is to get as fast and as cheap as possible, to be as efficient as possible, to be able to deliver compute into the market at a profitable rate. So as compute gets cheaper, the ability to run these processes becomes cheaper. Therefore, there is more of a profit margin involved in running these processes, and therefore it becomes more widely accessible because it becomes commercially feasible for organizations to utilize and sell compute. So that's one side of the fence of the computing capabilities and the ability to process information is high, but it is gradually slowing down, gradually decreasing. On the flip side, just like we said before, our brains take up a lot of energy. We are approaching a zero cost energy future thanks to renewable energy and nuclear if you're lazy. So the power that's required to run these computers is not cheap, particularly now if you're in the Ukraine. And the computing power to run these very complex algorithms and data is also not cheap. So even though Microsoft and OpenAI has 100 million active users on ChatGPT, they would absolutely be smashed on computing power and general electricity to run all of these complex processes at once, particularly if they're running them in somewhere like Microsoft Azure, which I'm sure they are, which is a cloud computing platform that I've sold much of in the past. That shit ain't cheap, okay? It's not like it's just a basic fucking hard drive and a really basic, PC that can run ChatGPT. This is run in huge server farms, probably locally geocached in different regions. So what does geocaching mean? That they would take a copy of the algorithms and they would have smaller versions in local areas, so the information doesn't have to travel as far to minimize the latency to get to the end user. That was very technical, but enjoy. So with ChatGPT, yeah, this stuff is computed at a distance in the cloud and then just sent to us in a nice little interface. So we don't really see the sausage factory that's behind it, which is, thousands upon thousands of server farms consuming millions of watts of electricity, giving you this information. Now, a cash-rich organization such as Microsoft can afford to do this because strategically it wants to invest in this high profitable new emerging technology and grab as much market share as possible, okay? Because this is an emerging technology, similar to what we had with Bitcoin and fucking Ethereum, there was this gold rush, right? This gold rush of organizations creating shit coins and all this other stuff to buy into the hype and create market share in this emerging technology, in this emerging market that had not been captured yet. Now, Microsoft pretty much has the monopoly on this AI technology in the consumer world because it has 100 million active users at the moment. So it's probably likely running ChatGPT 3 or OpenAI at close to a loss or at a loss at the moment to get front of mind, to get presence. This becomes a strategic marketing play to be the first organization to market and lead the category. Because in marketing terms, if you want to become a massive player in your market, you want to lead the category of the vertical of the product that you're in, a subsection of it, such as Coca-Cola is the category king of the soft drink industry, right? So OpenAI and Microsoft now have a significant opportunity to be the category king of AI because they're the first to market on a mass scale to implement this and sell this to the market in general. So to maintain its potential share of market and share of wallet, it will try and get into as many organizations, into many people as possible and get them accustomed to using the product and make it sticky via association and comfort of using and the ease of using the product because they're used to it. That's a common trope that's used in marketing and in sales, is to get a person as close to the product, experiencing it as possible, so they feel like it's already a part of them and they're more likely to buy it and use it. And the problem is with this sort of stuff, just like cloud computing itself, it's a very sticky product. So when we say it's a sticky product, what we mean is it's very hard to get out of and exit out of once it's integrated into your ecosystem. And Microsoft has been very good with that for a long time as a software company, and then as a cloud company, and eventually as an AI company, okay? So I'll give you a perfect example. I'm in the cloud computing industry, or just the compute industry itself. Cloud, over the last 3 to 5 years, has become an emerging technology, and in the B2B world is pretty prevalent as the next step in the evolution of cloud computing, or just the compute industry in general. People used to have servers on premise and they all want to go into the cloud. And they don't want to have tin in their backyard anymore, or in their offices, or in the data centers. They want to put it in Microsoft's cloud and Amazon's cloud for a variety of reasons: efficiency, simplicity, etc., etc. And Microsoft and Amazon make it very easy to put the data in there. Sure, come, use our products. They're quite cheap. They're going to be cheaper in the long run because it's so much more efficient and it's much easier to use. Realistically, it's not. And we're seeing a lot of people come off the public cloud back onto on-premise, which is perfect for me because that's the shit that I sell, on-premise compute. How it's a challenge for customers to get out of that cloud when they realize it's not the dream that they thought of is they charge for the egress, the exit of that data. So it's easy to put it in, but it's very hard to take it out, right? It's like a Chinese finger trap for computing and as a resource. So you put the fingers in, yeah, nice and easy, but you try and tug it out, what's going on here? Similar to AI. This will be a similar problem with AI because AI is not just replacing infrastructure, it's replacing functions inside a business. That's one of the main immediate benefits of utilizing AI is to replace low or non-value adding tasks inside a business and minimize the cost of that operation. So if you've got AI that can do the work of 5 people or 10 people in a business and you integrate that AI solution into your business and you go, this is costing me too much or I think there's a better product, sure, take it out, but how the fuck are you going to do that? Because how are you going to replace that function in your business with a new solution without minimizing the downtime in the migration of that data, any of the assumed knowledge and learnings from that knowledge, from that AI, is probably going to be kept by the organization that sells it, so you're not going to get your data back. That's another big problem down the line, is how will organizations that give their data into the learning machine take it back if they don't want it to be in there anymore? Another huge problem. And then how will you replace one AI function with the other and make sure it learns it effectively without minimizing the loss of profitability, the loss of productivity in your business? That's another big question that IT leaders and organizations are going to have to face in the future once they utilize AI to replace labor costs in their business, which they inevitably will. So once it gets in, it's going to be very hard to get out. So you've got to learn how to master it and make sure that it's doing the right things for you inside your business, inside your life. So to wrap that up, AI, early days, still some gaps. It's got a lot of hype around it at the moment. It is a legitimate threat to a lot of the functions within society, but there is significant opportunity as well. Right? There are plenty of positives to it, but for now, for the average person, I can see and understand why it's a threat. So our next part is going to be how can we work around AI or make the most of it. So let's look at some other underlying concepts of AI. AI is logic-based. It is knowledge-based, okay? So yes, it will challenge a lot of our calculating power, but it will not replace a lot of the human elements of society. From an intelligence perspective, it's not quite there yet. It's a calculating machine, right? It's a fantastic calculator, but intelligence, wisdom, insight, again, unverifiable. It doesn't have the ability to utilize experience and time to ratify the information that provides you. And then societally, we live on a spectrum between logic and emotion. And robots, AI, cannot feel things. It can try and replicate it very poorly at this point in time. And it's how do you teach something how to feel? That's another great philosophical question for another time. So based on this, AI has a big gap in the the emotional, the expressive, the creative side of humanity. And the ability to feel things, to empathize, to utilize intuition, and the feeling side of humanity will be relatively untouched, right? When we talk about energy, when we talk about vibe, when we talk about soft skills, people skills, that ability to connect on an analog level, right? Nothing beats human interaction. Just like we've had with, the advent of video communication, FaceTime, Teams, sure, great convenience tools, but nothing beats an analog connection. Nothing beats meeting a friend, meeting a family member, meeting your team in person, pressing the flesh, and organically connecting, because that's what we've been hardwired to do for millions of years. So that's not going to go away all of a sudden because we've got some fucking flash computer doing crazy shit over in a server somewhere. So how do we utilize that to our advantage? So if you are looking at changing careers and you want to get out of whatever the fuck you're doing and you're thinking about your next move, focusing on human-centric jobs, anything that's service-based, is a great way to dodge the bullet of AI, so to speak. So anything that's really service-based, anything that improves the human condition, right? If you want to become a therapist or a mental health worker, if you want to become a nurse, something that's tactile and interactive with people is going to be less impacted or not impacted at all by AI. Almost everything will be augmented, but nothing will replace those roles and functions within society. So, for example, the arts will still have a very strong place in society. I do not think that AI art will take over society or will lose a lot of the available market and the interest in human created art or whatever. For the sake of good art reflects the human condition. So it's, when you listen to a great song, when you see a painting, you see a sculpture, you can see the way that a person has interpreted their perspective on the world. And you see the individuality, and if they're a great artist and you get into them, you get to see their unique fingerprint, their unique impression on the universe. And that is the depth of connection that great art has and great creativity has. And once I think personally, as an artist, although that sounds pompous, but the reality is I am a creative as well as an intellectual, that authenticity, the good, the bad, the imperfections of that's what we truly value within art and creativity. So I think people will be less likely or not really into AI generated art, AI generated creativity. I think there'll be a subsection of people that say, hey, this looks fucking cool. And yeah, sure, right? If you are someone that is creative but you lack the technical ability to realize your vision, like for me, AI generated art is cool because I can't draw for shit. Then yeah, it might have a function and it might be a great hobby. And there'll be an emerging market for AI art and things that look cool, so on and so forth. Absolutely. But I think it'll be a niche. And again, the sound of just like how vinyl has its place in music, and people still love a fucking bit of canvas and oil when it comes to painting and art. The authentic human condition expressed through any medium creatively will still maintain its place in society and to be valuable. And if anything, it'll be increasingly valuable and increasingly available as we take away logical and process oriented jobs and they are replaced with more creative jobs that interact with humanity. Perfect example, podcasting. Right, I got this great example from Naval. Again, Naval Ravikant and the Joe Rogan, fantastic podcast episode. Listen to it. It has all of the bases that I'm talking about here about AI. I don't pretend to know all this shit by myself. I'm an amalgamation of sources, and Naval is one of them. Listen to that podcast. Amazing stuff. But for example, yeah, podcasting, right? Technology has enabled podcasters to exist, to make a living, being human, being authentic, through a means that was not available to us 30 years ago because of technological limitations through networking, broadcast media, etc. So there are people that make a living playing video games and streaming on Twitch, which was not available until the evolution of technology to enable that. And we will see that again with AI as it takes away jobs that do not necessarily serve humanity. They're just there to, fucking create things or whatever. And it enables us to have the mental bandwidth and capacity to do creative things, right? So I think that will happen, and we will see the adoption of AI and the acceptance of AI to augment and uplift our creative capability as a tool, just like anything else that has digitized over the last 30 years. I'll give you another perfect example. I was a rock musician, right? Played bass, electric bass, used to be an upright bass. When the upright bass, which was acoustic, big hollow body, couple of fucking gut strings, right? Went into electric bass, I'm sure there was some fucking purists out there that were like, oh no, the electric bass is dog shit. It's all about the double bass and the upright bass. Very similarly, me 10, 15 years ago as a rock musician, seeing my roles being replaced by DJs and by electronic artists, I thought that shit was dumb, right? There's a couple of guys hitting pads or just DJing, pressing play, as I used to say. That's all they did. But then, as I appreciated the complexities of what they were doing, the intricacies, and coming back to music again a decade later and seeing the quality of sounds and the capabilities that they're able to produce through electronic music, and some of my favorite artists being electronic music artists now and performing with pads and synths on stage as opposed to drum kits and guitars. Again, societally, generationally, we'll accept these things and will evolve. We don't know how these things will happen necessarily yet, but they will happen. And that's kind of the beauty of life, is to see what these next evolutions in the right direction can enable for us. So I am, optimistic about the ways that we can use AI and these emerging technologies for good. So we've talked about human jobs, right? We've talked about creativity. Let's talk about functional roles. And what I mean by that is trades, being a plumber, being an electrician, physical labor jobs will not be replaced by AI in the near future. Why? Because AI is intelligence and logic based capability, right? You still need a good, strong pair of hands, and you still need dynamic range of physical movement to get shit done, to build houses, to build infrastructure, to connect pipes, all of the stuff that we have to live on. And at this point in time, AI and intelligence is cheaper than robotics, right? Because AI and intelligence, the replicable cost of that is close to nil because it's all software and coding that can be copied and pasted and then replicated elsewhere. You can't do that with people yet. Humans are thankfully quite cheap to build. They are a bunch of water, carbon, and a handful of trace elements and minerals. Robots, pretty fucking expensive. Steel alloy, aluminium, titanium, cobalt, lithium ion if they need energy sources, which they will, and the ability to store information and this intelligence in a ruggedized environment is challenging, right? When there are so many physical ways that this intelligence can be disrupted, right? If you've got a robot and it gets bonked in the head by, a 2x4 or a steel rod that breaks the central computing system, which would kill a human, it's also going to kill the capabilities of that robot and the intelligence that's inside it. So anything with dynamic physical range of movement. I know we've seen things like Boston Dynamics and those dogs that are fucking doing some crazy shit at the moment, and those humanoid robots that are flipping around and are scary. They're not cheap enough to be adopted by the mass market yet, so we're still some way away from that becoming a possibility. But that's not to say within 15, 20 years, that won't be viable in the long term. But hopefully by then, you will have evolved your life to a point where you're not doing physical labor. Maybe you've gone from the tradie to owning the business. And you can utilize the AI to manage your financial systems and compliance and all that sort of stuff, blah, blah, blah. So the other way that we can use AI to our advantage is to work with it, right? Remember that the relative intelligence of AI right now is that uppity teenage intern, right? Keen, wants to learn fast, will learn fast, but does not have experience, doesn't have the soft skills, the human skills to utilize its full capacity yet in the modern world. So what do I mean by that? For example, you could work inside the AI industry. You could sell the stuff, you could develop it, you could code it. I think personally that I think that tech sales, what I do right now, will not necessarily be impacted by AI that much. It will be augmented, but not replaced to a degree. Because again, if you are a good salesperson, it's more of a human interaction and a human interface with multiple complexities and multiple complex stakeholders, and being able to, recognize and attenuate all of their needs and centralize them into an outcome. Robots can't do that because they don't understand human sentiment right now and what's in it for humans. Right? We won't see robots being leaders. We won't see robots taking over the human elements of life. So therefore, selling complex technologies like this, which is a complex process, will not be replaced by AI. So anything that requires a high amount of emotional intelligence, societal intelligence, i.e. sales and consulting, not going to be replaced. So to get inside the AI and use it to your advantage is a way to, not be disrupted by it, to get inside the problem itself. And then, the functional tools of using it in an organization to improve your capacity, your outputs, that's still being developed, right? So people will productize AI into specialized solutions for their industry to solve specific business problems. We're seeing that happen day after day. There's lots of software companies that are doing that right now, a lot of startups in this space. But again, that's most of them will be wiped out over the next 10 years as the more successful and the better honed solutions rise to the top, right? Just like the dot-com boom of the early 2000s, where there were thousands of internet companies that popped up, most of them died in the bust, and we only had a few survivors like eBay and Amazon and whatnot. Same thing will happen with AI, right? This is cyclical. Any new emerging technology, any new trend, it's all cyclical. And we will talk about macro cycles in the next episode. I watched this great video by Ray Dalio. I don't want to ruin it, but we'll talk about the economic cycles in the next episode because it actually has a lot of relation to what we're talking about here. So working inside it, adding it to your business. I'm not going to talk about how it can improve your business because there's so many options out there and it's too specific to a situation. But again, those low intelligence tasks, anything that's being outsourced to India, to the Philippines, will be replaced by AI. So if you're in India, Pakistan, the Philippines, and you're working at a call center right now and you listen to this podcast, hey, hello, and also watch the fuck out. And then, look, the last way that I think we can work around AI is to just fucking unplug from it, right? We get so concerned about this artificial digital intelligence that's going to take over and destroy us all and outsmart us and eradicate us from society. But don't forget, we can just unplug this fucking shit too and unplug ourselves. The answer could just very well be to get off grid, start a farm, fuck society off, right? Go back to the fucking Stone Age and enjoy life, authentically, organically, in nature, and not have a problem with it. This is tweet from Tyler the Creator that I think about a lot, which I think is kind of relevant now, and it's about cyberbullying. And I can't say it all because he says the N-word, which I cannot say, unfortunately. But this is what he goes. He goes, ha 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 ha, how the fuck is cyberbullying real? Ha ha ha. N-word, just walk away from the screen. Like N-word, close your eyes. Ha ha ha. Which is pretty true, right? There's this conversation around the Matrix and how we're being sucked into it or whether we live in the Matrix. But the answer to that is to just remove all modern conveniences from the city, get away from all this bullshit, and just start again somewhere else, planting shit, creating, biodiverse and what's it called? There's self-fulfilling farms. I forgot what they're called. You know what I mean? Just farm ecosystems, live off the land, grow alpacas or raise alpacas, get some chickens. And I'll tell you fucking what, I might be a technologist, but the idea of that becomes more and more tempting every single day. I think in my near future, or maybe not too near future, but a few years from now, once I've got a little cash stacked up from all the tech, I'm going to invest it into some sort of property out in the middle of fucking nowhere, near a body of water, probably a nice beach house somewhere, so I can just unplug from the fucking world, get back to nature, ground, sun, surf, quality food, just as Mother Nature intended. So, despite all of these worries about the modern world, do not forget that nature, Mother Source, Gaia, is always there to nurture us a long way from all this bullshit, and will look after us if we needed to as well. So that's the episode, guys. A big old brain dump on AI, where I think it'll help us for better or for worse. Do not fret It is not going to knock on your door and fucking break it down and steal your kids tomorrow. It is here to stay, but we've got a runway and we've got plenty to do to prepare for it or make it work in our favor. So, plenty of ideas here. If you've got any ideas of how you think AI will change and influence life, please reach out. I'm very interested in this topic now because it is a bit of a buzz, but realistically, it does need to be considered into every major decision you make in your professional career and aspects of your life as well. So, folks, if you want to chat, hit me up in the DMs at Jamil J. Raymond and all the things on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. Another reminder, I am giving away a copy of Waking Up, 12-month subscription to Waking Up, fantastic meditation app and mindfulness app we talked about in the last episode. So please go onto my link tree. I've actually, do I have a website? Yeah, I'll try and get the website up this week. JamilJRaymond.com, again, to match all of the other socials. Sign up for the mailing list before May 6th. And on the May 9th episode, I think it is, I will announce the winner. All you have to do is just sign up for the mailing list. I'm just finding a way to get a little bit of exchange out of this. I will start posting newsletters and content via newsletters soon. Things like the systems that we've talked about, a more permanent place to put all of our learnings in place so you can keep it, retain it for life, and, keep it delivering value for you guys. Besides that, folks, the usual stuff, like, share, subscribe, send this to friends if you think this is interesting, spread the good word of the binge thinker. And again, thank you very much for your time and attention, bingers. Thank you very much for your time and attention, bingers. My name is Jamil Raymond. I will see you next week. Ciao for now.